All right, we made it. Anton, how you doing today?
Yep. Doing great. Doing great. A little tired, but that's usual.
Let's jump right into it, my man. We ain't gonna waste any time. But for the people who are watching who are not familiar with you, and shame on them, give us a little TLDR about what you do, who you are, and we'll get started.
Sure. I'm Anton. I'm one of four members of Rust Limited. We're game design studio, I guess. We've been a number of things over the years. We started as a just as an artist collective, sort of creative collaboration, and have been working together for most of our adult lives at this point. And we have a game out on Steam called Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, which
Yep.
we're now over 5 years in early access, just continuing to throw more fun stuff on the pile.
And for the purposes of this podcast, or whatever you call this, H3 is probably what I will refer to your game as, just to save myself the tongue twister.
Of course.
But look, I want to jump right into H3 a little bit in a sense of a little bit of a comment. I've seen your game since I started, like since I got my Vive. The game's been there. Played it. It's fantastic to me. But I don't think it's controversial to say that people either love your game or really don't like it. Like why is that? What is this dichotomy going on?
I mean, it's well, for one, it's you could argue that it's a game, like that's the most accurate sort of term for sort of high level container for it, which in and of itself people love to argue about that sort of thing. Like, I've always thought of it as being a collection of games, experiments, and sandboxes that share themes, systems, content, etc. And there's a certain sort of person that is, when they put on VRHMD, what they're looking for is a capital G game that signals everything from the splash screen to the main menu to the way it operates. They expect a certain smell of gameness to their whole experience that I sort of rejected right from the beginning, because my background prior to H3 is not games industry. It's as an experimental electronic artist. It's as someone who's been doing VR stuff since 2004. And so it's if H3 has a weird feeling when you load in, that it doesn't quite feel like another game, that's quite intentional. And so I think there's a certain sort of person that is expecting to load in, get their capital G game, and immediately be told what to do, that rubs the wrong way.
Yeah, it's pretty apparent to some. I think you have a very unique user base. For better or for worse, they're very, very vocal, which has its pauses, but I have much more negatives, I would assume. They're super vocal, but it's kind of like they're bought in. They feel like, I see some people like arguing with you on Steam about adding a new feature. They have 300 plus hours in the game. It's a very unique like relationship you have with your users, because they are bought in, but at the same time, they're so bought in that I feel like they almost think it's their game at times, and it's interesting. I don't know if you get that vibe.
Yeah, and I mean, anytime we're talking about a community for a game, there's people who play it, and then of the people who play it, there's a tiny percentage of them that are going to interact with you on any platform ever.
Yes.
One of the number one mistakes that people who make video games make right off the bat is that they think that the percentage of people that interface with them through Steam, through YouTube, etc., is actually the representative sample of all players, instead of a subset in terms of age, engagement, free time, etc., that is biased in many directions. And then of that group, there's then maybe once again, a couple percent that are super engaged and super passionate, usually super opinionated as a result. And there's a lot of affect management that goes on to dealing with that. But, I would say, you'd made a comment, said that it was more on the downside. And at this point, most certainly not. I mean, things like that take a lot of curation. There have definitely been periods of the game's development where things were more drama oriented at times, but especially nowadays, like the folks who are still with the project, by and large, a few of them can be a little annoying or a little abrasive in the way that they express their desires, but by and large, it's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, let's talk about that though. On these, like, when you bring up people can be critical or give a critique, it's an interesting comment when you say it that way, because I've noticed a trend Um, it's like depending on the outlet. Like if you have a YouTuber, the critique is like good or bad. That's it. There's no nuance. Is it good? Is it bad? And it's going to be in 10 minutes, and there's going to be nothing else to it. If it's a journalist doing it, and I'll let you can speak on what you see, but I see journalists, they're going to go more highbrow. They're going concept, think pieces for their articles. But I'm not like, I see movie reviews and 20-minute television or 20-minute anime episode reviews that are like a One Piece episode, which is blatantly mostly filler in a lot of these episodes, and they get more of a thorough examination of that 20 minutes than like a VR review would be. What's your take on that? Like, why is this whole dichotomy of like reviewing games not more in depth and critical?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, first off, when it comes to just written media, no one reads.
No.
You know what I mean? The like people engage with written media, as far as I see it, from sort of two perspectives, which is either confirmation of something they already feel about something, because they want that, like, oh yeah, other people are liking this, I feel good because I liked that thing, or they know nothing about a thing and want a quick, I want in 8 to 12 seconds, I want to know whether I should go find a video about this thing and maybe check out if it's something I want to buy, or check out if it's something I want to get into, or do I not bother, because we all have endless feeds of an infinite amount of media at all times. And the greatest challenge at any given moment is about efficient parsing and about being able to early out and discard things that we're not interested in as quickly as possible. And so I think that's something that has undermined the notion of what a game review is supposed to be and how it's supposed to function in the first place. Because obviously there's certain sets of writers and creators that want to do more in-depth, long-form content, and doesn't appear to be what the general audience is looking for. The general audience wants to, oh, that's an 82, boom, and they just want to move on right from there. And usually it's people who are already bought into something that they're like, I want to know more about what that thing that I loved was actually like. I just played Death Stranding, I didn't understand 2/3 of it, but it hit me importantly. I'm gonna go watch this hour-and-a-half long video about it so that I can understand what I just consumed.
Did H3 start? I don't know the answer to this. Did it start, since I know it's Steam VR? Was it early access to start, or did it release out? Yeah, I'm assuming early access.
Yeah, and I mean, H3 launched as a barely anything in a way, because what happened is, relative to the other early developers who had a Vive pre dev kit, or even the sort of cobbled together dev kit that preceded it, I got access to one fairly late. And which meant that, and I had basically not really set out to make a game, but just to make some experiments and triangulate where the tech had come since the last time I had played with hand-tracked VR, basically a decade earlier. And it was through videos of those experiments going viral that we made the decision as a group to try to, and basically people like banging down my door, like, I get a Vive on April 5th. Can I just buy the scene you have? That we decided to like death march out a barely early access thing. I wouldn't even call it a game at the time. It was just a thing. It was some experiments.
How'd you get past the? Now I think people's expectations. What year was this? Like 17?
2015.
15, even earlier. So I'm assuming people were much more patient there. But did you find any pushback, like you said, where people want the quick? Is this good, bad? Just the early access moniker for a VR title at the beginning caused some frustrations, or was it early enough at that point people were a little more calm and chill and waiting?
I mean, that moment was so dense with enthusiasts,
Yes.
Who were just hungry for any sort of content, and the audience in general slanted older by almost a 20-year average. Like, I would say, like, the average age of the VR user now is probably, like, of the new people coming in, is probably like 16 to 17 sort of thing. Back then it was probably like 35, possibly even older, for that first gen. And so people were way more patient, but at the same time there were still some people being like, this is not a game, this is barely in anything. And we were just tried to be as super open about it as possible and be like, look, we're going to start updating this every week, every Friday with a video. You can follow along. Don't feel pressured to buy it now.
Yep.
Just follow along. And if at any point it becomes something you might be interested in, buy it at that point. It was the like less than zero pressure approach to selling it that we took.
And why hot dogs? Though I got to ask, why hot dogs over humans?
I mean, the original, it started with the title of the game because just because of the like punning around and wordsmithing we do as a group, we had wanted to go with an alliterative title. And obviously had started with that like close only counts with horseshoes and hand grenades, because we had started with throwing experiments very early on. And we're trying to reach for an H word that had some sort of like thematic unity with like explosives and weaponry and such, as well as like horseshoes, thinking about it as like that's a summer sort of outdoor grilling game, and so sort of very Americana, and that's where hot dogs ended up being that. And then we basically just leaned into that as a thematic over time, sort of as the game grew further and further with its absurdity. But in terms of like why hot dogs and not people, a lot of it came from not wanting to make a game that was first and foremost about recreational sport shooting as a culture, and not war, and not a battle game. And also just that it was you got to remember that H3 was very different than it was now. It was dominated by sandbox content then, whereas it isn't now. And it was that sort of thing that when you place a person in and represent a person in a context that is completely abstract, that's devoid of context, you're basically going, here's a killable person here, a person here for you to kill. And that is just uncomfortable to me. It's uncomfortable. It's strange. It's certainly not buoyant. And it's, we had been proceeding with the game, especially in the early days, about primarily making a very like relaxing experience. I had talked about like selling H3 was about selling people a backyard and a bunch of fun toys to play with in their backyard. And I didn't really want to like be working on something every day that was just like really visceral, realistic violence.
And I think when like the first time I saw the trailer for it, because as a hungry enthusiast back then, like I'm going Steam and I'm top VR games, and there wasn't much, and H3 was pretty much on that list 24/7. So you're looking at, and one thing that always kind of caught my eye is like I played Pavlov a lot, and I'm not focused on the weapons. You don't got time to focus on the weapons. It's pick your loadout real quick, go. H3, it always seemed like there was a focus on the guns. It was, here's the guns, how can you use them? And what can you accomplish with them, which was much different. Like that's what a lot of people love about like Gorman and Blade and Sorcery. It's about what you can do with what you have, not go do it. It's about just experimentation. And you were the first on that. And I always thought, okay, that makes sense that we have not humans. Because if it was humanoid, that's a threat. Like it's a threat in my mind. A humanoid in a game is a threat pretty much in almost every single game. So my first instinct is kill. A hot dog, it's not threatening. It's fun. My first instinct isn't shit, kill. It's, okay, what do I got to have fun with here? And let's go. It's sort of what Gorn did. Those gladiators, they're comical. They're not threatening. They're comical. And now I can experiment and have some fun. So I see where you're going with that. Of course, H3 is PCVR only. And that's always been interesting to me. I'm not going to put words in my mouth. I don't think you're anti going to the quest. It's just not what you want to do. That's how I see it. Have you ever thought... Go ahead.
I mean, there are layers to it. The first is just that, like, almost everything that makes H3 special and unique is H3's sort of performance requirements are pretty inverted to most VR games. Most VR games are GPU bound. They're like, most of what makes them expensive is what they're drawing and the complexity of what they're drawing, which means that they're fairly, even if they're difficult to port to something like the Quest, they're straightforward to solving that problem. H3 is completely inverted. H3 absolutely hammers, especially a single fast thread on the CPU, and is incredibly forgiving on the, like, it can be dialed down to a preposterous extent on the GPU. I think the slowest GPU that I've had a user confirmed who happily played the game, at least they were happy, was a 765M on their work assigned laptop. It still had an i7 in it, so they're playing on WMR, lowest quality settings, probably getting 60 FPS, but they were happy. But if you throw a really weak CPU at the game, it just dies. It just, because everything is so physics driven. The AI is very complex. The sound mixing is very complex, and that's something that doesn't migrate down onto like Android hardware well at all. So so just from a technical standpoint, even if I was super enthused and excited and wanted to go to Quest, I would have to it would require effectively starting from scratch and constructing something that didn't contain most of what I find interesting about working on the project in the first place. So it would have the H3 name on it, but it wouldn't actually be the product that I have passion for. And that's, so there are obviously a whole bunch of other secondary concerns, but even setting those aside, it's because you get different sorts of philosophies between, like, I know some people who are more on the biz devy side, and the way that they think about making a software product and developing a project is, I'm going to call it H3 and then make whatever will run on that hardware, because that's my goal, is to make a product. Whereas for me, it's always been about exploring a certain vision and exploring certain sorts of systemic relationships, and authoring systems that are interesting to me, and doing experiments that are interesting to me. And if I can't do it on the hardware, then I'm just, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I appreciate you. It's a weird comment, but I think you're one of the few keeping PCVR dreams alive. Now, the topic of PCVR being dead and stuff too, like, I kind of struggle with the thought of just defining, first of all, PCVR, because if you ask people, tethered is PCVR and standalone is not PCVR. However, standalone with virtual desktop, some still consider that not PCVR. What's Anton's definition of PCVR, and how do you see it going in the next, is it coming back the decades?
I mean, I think of PCVR as software that needs a PC to run.
That's what I do.
Like, yeah. I don't care what the method you're going about doing it is. Like, I had a user a while back that was using a PSVR HMD and like Wii nunchucks with custom software to get it all running. That was PCVR. He was running on a PC and playing PCVR games. That's PCVR as far. I'm not one of those people that likes to, create these weird, arbitrary excluding boundaries. But that's what it is to me. And I don't know. I think almost everyone who calls anything dead is doing so in this premature way. I think that's an affliction of gamers in general, that like you have games that are no longer getting active content and thus they're immediately dead. Like, a dead game is a game you can't play anymore.
Yes.
Like, I can't install it because it relied on it only ran under Windows 2000 or something. That's a dead game. If you can still play it, it's not a dead game. Like, so I find those, but the thing is, people nowadays instead conceptualize this game as alive versus dead, in that like this is actively growing, hopefully accelerating in its growth, so that I'm both getting more primary source content, but also getting a whole bunch of free secondary source content from its community. But the fact of the matter is, like, there could be no more PC VR games coming out made by anyone, but with VR chat still going, like, PC VR wouldn't be dead, because there's a huge creator community in there. So any sort of notion that that's dead because right now it isn't in anyone's interest to release a new PC VR HMD product in the next 6, maybe 12 months is just silly.
It's very silly. And it's also, well, let's put it this way. It's emotionally charged. It's a lot of emotional attachments from the OG enthusiast who unfortunately saw VR. I think you and I agree on this one. We've talked about it before. VR reset with the Oculus Quest 2. And that's fine. But you have a lot of people who are emotionally charged, who feel, for some reason, I don't understand why they feel slighted. You had fun for a few years and things restart. Sorry, you're going to continue to have fun. It's not a big deal. Just keep having fun. But it did kind of reset. And I don't know how long it'll take to fix, but I don't think anyone knows how to fix it. There's no short term solution.
Yeah, and even beyond the sort of reset, I think the sad fact of the matter is that people had very unrealistic expectations to begin with, because it's harder to make a video game than most even diehard fans of video games want to act like they have actually admitted to themselves. Even if they've said they admit it, they don't, or acknowledge it, they don't act like it. Even if we hadn't had a situation where a ton of people got burned out, a ton of people got acqui-hired, etc., and so a bunch of that collective knowledge contracted, the first wave of this wasn't exactly a huge creator community to begin with. Like, it wasn't actually enough experts to seed an entire large game industry to build this magical wave of full-scale real games that everyone wanted. Like, I'm sorry, it's just going to take a lot longer to create that base of expertise.
Yeah, and I don't know if many, like, who's ever watching this and you've been playing VR since early on. Do you honestly, are you kidding yourself that you thought it was great when you were playing it? It was fun, but fun and great and quality can be three different things. And I had a blast playing when I was playing, but the save was good. I remember playing Atex Cybernetic one day. Fun game. Not good. I mean, at the time, it was buggy as hell. Barely worked. Doom BFR or whatever it was. Fun. Arguably not probably great, but to put that on a pedestal that, hey, that's at least PCVR they're trying. No, it's not. We got to recalibrate here. That's fine.
Yep.
One thing, it's a little bit of a change of topic, but you brought up VR chat. And I saw a tweet from you that I really got to dive into, because VR chat, Rec Room, Dreams, user-generated content platforms. You're pretty against them, seems.
I'm not against the creator communities of them.
Yes.
Nor the content, nor enjoying those spaces. I think the VC driven business model that almost all of those platforms use is inherently parasitic. It's specifically they generate value for investors precisely by mining free labor of enthusiast early adopters and uncompensated creatives in a way where that entire business model wouldn't function if all of those people were actually just paid up front for their creative labor, which, even if it isn't fully owned by license by the platform, is sort of de facto owned because it's completely proprietary. People who create their art in those platforms can't just take it elsewhere. It's not like Photoshop or even making something in Unity where I make a thing and then I take it and I can just freely distribute it to other people. I don't have to keep asking Unity or Adobe if I can do so. It's instead completely locked away in that platform, and they hold all of the cards in that relationship. So, and I think the only reason that we keep seeing those types of platforms occur over and over again is that they're a very, very good deal for investors, because it's a whole bunch of people laboring uncompensated.
I mean, it's a good deal for investors, but before I make this comment, let me separate it. I'm going to take kids out the equation, because if we get into the kids, okay, it gets way more gray for me there in a bad way, but I'm going to take out the kids. So let's talk about adults, since it's a little more easy to talk about that. Where's the parasitic relationship? Like, how are these people who are choosing to use those platforms and making content, how are they not benefiting from this? Especially if these games like Rec Room has started it, VR Chat says they're going to do it, they haven't done it, but creator economies could be coming to the games.
I mean, I was a longtime Second Life user. Like, I feel this sort of way to a certain degree precisely because, like, I made my living wholly in Second Life from about 2005 through about 2008, 2009. I taught a little on the side, but a majority of my income.
What did you do in there? That's pretty interesting.
I sold apartments that I modeled. I sold shoes and components for things. I was a complex shape master intermediary for other business people in that space. I did a whole bunch of contract conference centers. Um, for a while, I worked for the largest like advertising, marketing, media company in Second Life at the time, called the Electric Sheep Company. They did that awful CSI episode that went in Second Life. Like a character holds like a plasma rifle in that episode. I made that plasma
Really?
rifle.
Wow.
So I did that stuff. And then for the longest time afterward, I taught classes. So I had something called Zeniversity, and I ran monthly workshops with other folks in Second Life on how to use Maya and Photoshop to make content for Second Life. And the students were basically everything from, I had just like people who wanted to do businesses in Second Life. I had probably the sweetest was this grandmother who like made dollhouses with her granddaughter across the country in Second Life. And then I had people who were role playing the college experience as just an RP game thing in Second Life because they had never been able to go to college themselves,
It's a
and
lot
then
cheaper
found
too.
out there was an actual class happening in SL. So they were like, let's go take the class. So they were role playing as students while still actually taking the class and doing the work. It was a head trip.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, actually. So I respect Second Life in that sense, where I understand if you have like a unique platform like that, creating virtual goods. This is going to sound hypocritical, but I can rationalize that. But I've been getting some DMs from like, I'm not going to name names right now because I don't even remember the name, to be honest. But they're selling virtual land in VR, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that. I understand virtual goods inside a unique game, but land is a scarce product that's not scarce in VR, and that seems weird. Taking something that isn't scarce at all and selling it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Can we take a quick break, super quick?
Yeah,
I want to make sure, is my video cutting out for you at all while I'm talking?
not at all.
Because yours is for me, so I wanted to make sure my recording was still coming through smooth for you.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's flawless.
Cool. Then so what was the question again?
Oh yeah. So for Second Life, you're creating digital goods, and I fully believe digital goods hold a lot of value. Like they really do. But you're not taking. You can create scarcity, just like almost like an NFT. Like you can create something that you only made a couple of, and now someone can have it. I understand that, but selling land, I don't know how I feel about that because that is an arbitrary thing. You can create as much land as you want. It's not scarce in a way, at least to my knowledge. I could be completely off on that. And I have people DMing me trying to make these platforms where they're selling space. Like I said, I'm not going to name them because I don't even remember the name, but I don't feel good about that. But maybe I'm asking you because having that expertise selling digital goods, and maybe I'm overthinking this and I'm wrong. I'm open to it, but I don't understand selling scarce or selling a product that's not scarce in any sense other than
Yeah,
artificially.
I mean, I don't know enough about the architecture of the way these modern platforms work to know whether the scarcity that is being sold is artificial or not. Like Second Life actually had some fairly, in part due to the era it was running in, but
Mhm.
also due to its architecture, had finite server resources in terms of how much data could be moving back and forth, how many users could be co-located in one place. And so when you were purchasing land in Second Life, you were effectively purchasing control over a portion of a persistent server that was running all of the time. And that makes obviously a certain sort of sense to me, but obviously has its own sort of problems because the powerful in that sort of environment were effectively all land barons.
Yes.
It very quickly become, and the people who were the most explosively successful in Second Life were the ones who already had capital in the first place to invest in, in having land and then constructing huge, renter customer bases, which of course just replicates all the fucked up things about our economy. Um, so
Yeah, that's kind of where I
I
was going with that thought.
Yep. Oh yeah, and it's Second Life is a I'm sure can be studied from the perspective of just like recreating a land boom akin to when we moved west, sort of thing. So
And I might be thinking, things can change, but I'm thinking like right now, these people selling virtual lands, like, well, what are you selling? Because you need to have that platform would have to be valuable. You can't sell land if well, you can, but if you're limiting the space, therefore you're creating real scarcity. So say you only can sell so much land, and that's it. That's it. So Somnium Space, I think, might be doing this, and someone can fact check me on that. But let's pretend they're doing it. If they're creating a world and there is a finite amount of space, then selling that land, I get. But now, what are we doing in that land? Because then you're also creating a limit on what you can create inside that place. Does that get stale? Does that get boring? VR chat could never do that because the fun of VR chat is that it's endless. It's endless. Therefore, why would I buy land in something that is endless? Doesn't make sense to me. But maybe down the line there is a platform that creates such land
if people
scarcity that
keep
it
minting
works.
an infinite number of stupid looking NFT gift trash, and people decide to buy that. So who knows?
I thought you were all bought in on NFTs.
You troll.
Oh man, hey, if it works, someone's getting rich off it, but not me. But let's circle back because I think we got a little off topic on the parasitic relationship. I really am curious because I understand where you came from for Second Life.
What I'm saying is is that like there are many ways if you're setting down to make a creative tool, which is what that is at the end of the day. It's a creative tool and it's a viewer for it. You can create a creative tool that is at its core designed to be emancipatory. Is designed to be like, here's this thing you can create in it. What you create in it is yours, or you can construct your creative tool and its platform to be less than that, to be, I call them restricted rights pseudo platforms. And that's what all of those are. They're designed, they're exciting. They have many interesting and oftentimes novel features. They need to be to get someone to want to use them instead of, say, downloading the free version of Unity and just making a game in that. So oftentimes what it is they need more users so that you already have an audience for what you're creating. And so that's what you're essentially you are trading the restricted rights context that you are authoring in for eyeballs that may or may not be present. And frankly put, it's a poor deal. Actually,
For the creator.
For the creator.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The person who is winning out in every one of these deals is absolutely the platform.
I'm not going to ask you to solve
simply
the
put,
problem.
it would be geometrically more expensive for them to actually just if you're there to come and be like, you know what, we're going to just get the 50 most talented such and such people to come in and just create worlds a la carte. Like that wouldn't. Like the investor would be like, but we can just trick people into doing it for free instead. Why would we pay people? And that just bothers me, and it always will.
I'm not going to ask you to solve the problem because that's asinine and there is no solution. What's the low-hanging fruit for a platform like Rec Room or VR Chat that not going to solve it, but will be the step in the right direction?
I don't think they have a step in the right direction. They exist and they have their funding precisely because they're built on an inequitable model. That's the reason they got their VC funding in the first place.
Yeah.
So the problem is actually how you're going about making that platform, like what your internal ethics are from the jump as someone trying to build anything.
And you're putting the onus then also. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So any solution that comes to my head right now, like solution in quotes, just maybe a plausible idea, it's putting the onus then on the creator who's ever making that stuff to go outside the platform. Basically, you're forcing them to pitch their sales on Patreon, to Kickstart, whatever. You're putting too much it's a lot of pressure on them outside the platform. Well, I mean, actually that's terrible, actually, I think about that. So not only does the game itself monetize off their creation, then Patreon monetizes off them trying to sell
it's
their.
That's
bad. That's bad.
It's rent seekers all the way down. It's middlemen inserting themselves in with the power of capital to essentially create very, very nice looking Venus flytraps to capture free creative labor, and it's just layers and layers of it. So
what? So then Facebook, did you see the article or the podcast? I don't know what it was. I read the headlines and kind of the TLDR of Mark Zuckerberg talking about Facebook's turning into a metaverse now. Are they about to start doing that model as well? Because I don't think it's Facebook Horizon. They're so far behind on that. But are they about to go about the freemium model and rent control that?
I mean, maybe they will for a while before they abandon it and start, the 7th thing they're going to create for 18 months. So who fucking knows? Some internal, like upper middle manager person who wants to jockey for their next FANG job raise when they leave Facebook and go to Amazon probably has a plan right now laid out for, they're like, hey, this is going to be my metaverse plan, and everyone flock to this, and that person won't work at Facebook in 24 months, so who fucking cares?
Yeah, God, ain't that the fucking truth? All right, man, state of VR. Since we're going to talk about Facebook, the state of VR. What's Anton's thoughts on VR?
VR is still wonderful.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it's wonderful. I don't want you to go on that. That's the easy answer, Anton. Right now,
no, it's straight up business. Like I'm doom and gloom with respect to the world in general.
I don't feel like that, by the way. I don't think you're doom and gloom. I think you get that moniker a few times. I never read your tweets or anything you put out as doom and gloom. Really not. Dead ass there.
Yeah, I mean, I mean the it stinks. Here's what I'd say. The worst thing right now is if you want to launch a VR product right now. That's the worst thing in VR right now. Because where the fuck are you going to launch something? The Quest, where like only the top couple apps get any amount of visibility, and who knows what you have to do to get them to feature you prominently. Probably eventually it'll be like stuff their stupid fucking ads in your game. You have PSVR, where Sony just doesn't give a shit about indies at all. Like they pretend to for short periods of time, and they won't probably start to pretend to again till they run out of AAA stuff to launch on PS5 for a little while in like 3 years. So that's a shitty place to think about launching. And like on Steam, like, good
luck finding
it. Good luck. You know, unless you're willing to spend 12 to 18 months building an organic runway of engagement into your product, which no one seems to know that they're supposed to be doing, even though we see this occurring. Like, Valheim, big successful PC game, they were on itch building a community through those forums for like 3.5 years before anyone had heard about the game. And that's why it exploded to the degree it is. Behind so many successful games is really, really long form, early work. And I think, a lot of folks who are trying to launch a VR product, especially if it's the first game they've ever made, just don't know that like you do that to have a snowball's chance in hell sort of thing, instead of a snowball's chance, like at the mouth of a volcano.
Yeah. I believe that. We talked about it on the show before. Talked about other places. Like, this is probably a poor example just because of how big the game. I feel like it had at least enough name recognition. But like Population 1, like there were alpha testers like 3 years ago. That might be exaggeration. It was a long time ago.
Like they were that was a project helmed by games industry veterans.
Yep.
With major money behind it. Like they came in super tactically. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had a formula. They're building something in the genre zeitgeist that didn't have serious competition at all.
Well, I don't know if you know, Population 1 development started before PUBG was even launched. Like that's how.
Really?
That's to my knowledge.
Okay.
I can straight up tell you that comes from watching a few interviews and speaking with, oh my God, I don't want to mispronounce his name, Chia-Chen Lee, the CEO of Big Box, that it was in concept around the PUBG time. That's how old that is. That's a long time to build a community, build a plan. But I can't expect an indie developer, especially like a solo dev. You look at like Tab Games making, what they're doing, like they don't have the ability to do that. So I don't blame them, but it's needed to have a snowball's chance, like you said. That kind of goes like when Thrill and Blair were going at it. That seems to be a little disconnect with Blair, not building that community in the sense that's going to get. Now his game is a little bit different, but I wish he would understand the importance of that community to get his game out there a little bit more. You and Blair,
I
to
mean,
me,
I
are
think he does. He just builds it his style, and is fine having it be a little more private and insular. You
yeah.
know, that's a totally valid approach. Not everyone has to tackle a general audience. You know, goodness me, I don't. You know, the
No,
two
not at
like
all.
two or three biggest requests that people ask for, like ABC. I'm like, wrong game. Go over there.
What is it? Humans? What are the other two?
Humans, multiplayer. Um, I mean, it's mainly those
Yeah,
two at this point.
that's what I see most of the time.
So they want the modding stuff to be right on the Steam Workshop. For the longest time, it was just any sort of modding support. Modding stuff now exists. They ask for it on Steam Workshop, which I'm not going to do because that interface is terrible. And there's like no good mass moderation tools, because Valve's entire approach to content moderation is, why moderate anything when you can be selling more things? And so they don't bother to author tools to be able to moderate things.
That makes sense. All right, man. Let's get some dislikes real quick. All right. I do
What?
some dislikes because a topic no one wants to talk about, but I do, and I want your take on it because it's important to me. Activision and Blizzard, they're in hot doo-doo right now. Well deserved. What I want to pull on this, and we can somehow get it to VR. For those who don't know, here's the quick TLDR and trigger warning if it's sensitive topic. High reports of abuse to females, especially, and every which way you could think of in a woman in gaming. That's the TLDR, sensitive subject, and I'm not going to make light of that situation. One thing that I saw that you talked about, and it's an interesting concept, is this almost the hierarchy structure of a AAA studio at this point. Is would a AAA VR studio basically go down this route? And that's, of course, a big assumption. A lot of speculating. You're putting words in their mouth, or I am. But to me, when you get to this big corporate structure, it is bound to be a fraternity. It is bound to be a fraternity.
I mean, to at the risk of like hammer and sickling things up a little bit too much here,
Why
I think
not?
it's the nature of like of large corporate hierarchies. Like their structure is inequity, and the way that inequity
Yes.
maintains itself is through hierarchies of top-down control and abuse and hazing. Like it's natural for that sort of thing to occur, because you're fractally disempowered working in that sort of structure. And I saw a very, very insightful tweet earlier today that one of the reasons that we're hearing about some of the stuff way more in the past 6 months is that people are working at home right now, so they actually feel physically safe to communicate these
Wow.
things. The same reason that a whole bunch of AAA games are getting delayed, because it's actually a lot harder to force people to physically crunch on a game past points of physical exhaustion when they are not trapped in a room with you. And
Ooh.
so I think that's probably part of the reason that all of these AAA companies are losing the ability to accurately schedule how long anything's going to take, because they can no longer be like, everyone come into the office tomorrow at 9 and no one's leaving till this is done. Like, you can't, you just boop, browser window closed. Sorry, the kids need me. Bye. Boop. And so I think it has loosened a whole bunch of the control infrastructure that these entities rely on over their employees. That is just as much ways of maintaining all of this incredibly dysfunctional and, fucked up inequity in the way people are treated, especially women.
That's heavy. Wow. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Like, and I do want to backtrack real quick. It's a little gaslighting, but yeah, the fraternity comparison, probably a poor comparison, because that gives them the out of being juvenile idiot kids when they're not. They're adults. They're not a fraternity. I was in a fraternity. I was a dumbass kid when I was 18 to 22. These are not dumbass kids making dumb decisions. This is top down, very, very, very poor structure that's been built for a long time. And I'm seeing a bunch of possible solutions online, which they're solutions because they're really not. I see a lot of people saying, stop buying the games. It's not that fucking easy. Does the consumer actually... this is probably where some people... I don't think the consumer has as much ability to stop this. as for stopping buying game sales. That's not
Not
going
in
to.
a first order way, but I think, the fact of the matter is that we've, people literally abused a production company
Yes.
into making them reanimate Sonic the Hedgehog from scratch here. Like it's this weird sort of dichotomy where consumers can accomplish anything, and they can get BioWare to remake the end of their game and a movie studio to reanimate Sonic, but the moment we actually talk about trying to mass punish these corporations for the way that they treat their workers. Oh no, collective consumer action. It doesn't accomplish anything, man. You're just wasting your time, man. It's just a symbolic. It can't do anything by its nature because people don't want to stop playing the things they like. And if they thought even there was a 1% chance that them not buying and playing the things they like could change something, and they're not doing that, they would feel bad.
Respectfully,
So
though, in those examples, with Sonic, that was hilarious when that happened. But between Sonic and other things like that, the end user technically is affected by that. Like the enjoyment of the enjoyment of the viewer of the Sonic movie is affected by how they like the visuals of it. So it affects them. But this
you don't
hierarchical
think
nature.
games would be better if the people making them weren't fucking burning out in exhaustion and pain all the time?
I don't know, because you look at every game that they keep doing crunch every time. You look at Cyberpunk. No one gave a fuck. They screamed to the stars, stop crunch, stop crunch, stop crunch. But no one gave a fuck. Like, yeah, they still bought the game. They didn't do anything about it. Now this one, I want them to. By the way, I'm on this, like, what Blizzard, Activision, Ubisoft, it's horrible. It's awful. And they're wrong. I personally am not going to buy any of their games. Like that's me though. But my point was, to your examples, the end user is affected by Sonic and that's their enjoyment of it. This is not tangible to them. Most of these people are sitting behind a keyboard. They're mostly males, and they're not having any of this impact to them. Like, they don't even understand remotely how this affects women. It took me a long time to understand this. Like, I was that asshole.
They can be made to. Once again, this is there's this weird sort of learned paralysis or performed paralysis the moment it's something that's like difficult and not immediately gratifying, that it's constructed as a slope of infinite height, or an unscalable wall, when in fact we know that like, and anyone who does marketing in games knows that good and bad news in relationship to all these media products function via network effects, where very small numbers of people have outsized effects in terms of the way that information is disseminated to everyone else, and what is and isn't allowed to have mind share via fairly small total numbers of humans has a huge effect on the success and failure of a product. There are known patterns to go about doing this, and I think just people are fucking cowards about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone will disagree with you about that. They are absolutely cowards. I've been a coward in the past. I have made the mistake of not defending. I'll be open about it, guys. I've worked at jobs before where I've seen things that didn't say shit, and that was fucked up. I was 18 to 22. There's no excuse. But goddamn, does it take a lot of education when you realize how fucked up certain things are, and you look back at it and be like, holy shit, I had the power to try, and I didn't. And that's completely fucked up. And these people at Blizzard, Activision, all these places, they've been telling us these stories for a long time. This is not new news. This is just big news. That's all this is. But it's not anything new. I hope to not see this translate to VR. And I'm trying, since this is a VR channel, to spin this in a way that I hope VR can maybe help dismantle some of these systems. Now that it won't dismantle any of the sexism and any of the prejudice. It's not. That's inherent. That needs to be tackled IRL. However, from a VR perspective, being able to be anyone we want in there, is there a place where VR can dismantle some of these paradigms of let's start with gender. If I see most guys being girls now in VR, which is fine, does it make it more confusing, and we stop going on appearance, since we know the appearance may not be indicative of the person, and does it help at all in this sense? Like, what if we go fully remote virtually.
I mean, that implies that appearance was
Yeah,
the causal trigger in the first place,
yeah,
instead of merely the desire for power over another individual and the like mass enculturation of knowing that a certain segment of an audience is more likely to react one way or another relative to your
yeah.
assertion, abrasively, abusively of power. So I'm far more of a cynic when it comes to those sorts of
No,
things.
I think that's a good point, though.
Um,
That's not being cynical. That's a fact. That it's a power dynamic. That yeah, I falsely attributed to appearance. However, how did that power dynamic happen if we go to a virtual space? Who? How do you identify the graph for power? What's the indicator that someone's in a virtual space with virtual beings? What's the indicator that that person wants power over somebody else?
I mean, just how to put this. I think people are always looking for a sort of technological solution for these sorts of
Mm,
things, when the way that we have always solved these sorts of problems is like healthy, sustainable, functional social structures made of people maintaining those. Like, almost every single behavioral problem online relates to a lack of moderation and a platform, a communication medium that has been constructed either like accidentally to have poor moderation, or more often than not, quite intentionally to have none. And this is what differentiates them from physical spaces. Like, you walk into a bar and start just screaming at random people, you're going to find your face meeting the concrete outside very rapidly, because
rightfully
it's a
so.
physical space. Like there are people empowered via their hands to be able to eject you from that space, and yet we continue to create many, many, many digital spaces wherein no one has that capability, and so they become violently anarchic at any.
Hmm.
This is the number. One of the big problems with the Steam forums is that, like, it's foisted upon every developer to have one, and there are very, very poor tools to track and moderate behavior. And so people are just sort of left to the wall. It's nice that Valve literally installed a button now that I think you only see if you're logged in as someone who has rights. That's literally a "I need help" button
Uh,
if you're an owner of the game. Like, that's indicative of, like, the fact that the button is needed at
yeah,
all
exactly.
means
That's
the
my reaction.
entirety of the structure failed, and that was the best idea anyone had. um and I think anyone who's run or participated in running a Discord knows all of this kind of thing to be true. So I think what's the best thing VR can do, in addressing these sorts of things, is trying to ask the question: how can I make pro-social spaces from the get-go, that empower the individuals who run those spaces to communicate what is essential in terms of people, what rules people have to abide by, tracking, um who, if people have come in as bad actors in the past, being able to restrict their future access, various sorts of trust models. I think VR chat, from what I've seen, I mean, I'm not an expert on it at all, but from the bits and pieces I've seen, they seem to do that very well, and seem to be very responsive to that. And But I think that's the core challenge, more than any other
Yes.
piece of the technology, and more than any other sort of, like, oh, I'm in VR, so I think and act differently. I think all of that is secondary to creating tools that empower people to build social groups, that they can feel safe in.
You probably saw it recently. I'm apologize. I don't know her name, but there was a woman who had a very poor experience, I believe, in Poker Stars recently, and that kind of went all around Twitter. That she was feeling very threatened, had a bad time. Unfortunately, some people in the VR community did not respond to that the correct way, and we went into the blaming. Um, and I don't know her name, but I feel terrible that she had that experience, and her experience is completely valid, and we can do better. I always ask the question when that comes up: is who's the number one person, or not person, entity that's setting up those tools? Is it going to be on the developers first? Is it going to be on the platform heads? Like, if it's an Oculus title, is it up to Facebook to do better, or are developers really the forefront of this? In my mind, it's the developers to provide the tools to the end user.
I mean, if they're a good, if they're a platform that's like, if you're a platform, then you provide value to the developers who are on your platform. So if it's the sort of thing that a platform can do better, or provide resources, especially to small developers, then that's something the platform should offer. It's like, it's in the same way that like on Steam, like, oh, I can have some leaderboards up there. Like, I
Hmm.
think there should absolutely be some sort of like, especially bluntly put, like fucking if they're gonna take 30%. You know what I mean? Like like I I need moderation help more than I need trading cards to go with my game. And it would be nice to see platforms think about like, oh, what are some things that we can provide, um, sort of globally that help with user issues. I mean, this has been something to my knowledge that you see in the console space clearly, like individual console developers don't have to deal with someone is being abusive through Xbox Live handles that. And
Hmm.
I think, despite the fact that obviously there are privacy concerns, especially when you attach real accounts to things, I think if we're thinking on a theoretical basis of at least of it done well, that's something a platform could provide. Considering that Facebook can't even do like basic support correctly for their devices, I wouldn't think they would handle user moderation well. They seem to be trying to handle that more and more with algorithms on their primary platform. So that's probably just going to go poorly.
Is tying your
Um,
real identity to your account like Facebook is attempting, putting aside their inadequacies on how they've handled it, but is that step, if someone did it right and could handle that, is tying your real life identity to your virtual profile a good moderation tool in your mind? Real world consequences for what you're doing.
yeah, I mean, I think, um, I think the difference is whether or not that's exposed publicly. Like, do I think you should have to like attach a credit card or something like that to something like that? Probably to prevent scammers primarily
Hmm.
from being able to just regenerate new accounts. Should I have to be able to present myself as Anton Hand to be in multi-user digital environments? I flatly reject that sort of requirement, and I think of it as being tyrannical and it primarily to the benefit of the platform holder because they want to keep, which is funny because in many ways, like my understanding of all the sort of modern metric stuff that both Facebook and Google run on is based on like shadow profiles. So even the necessity of having that sort of like publicly tied identity isn't really necessary for their data acquisition. So it only comes across as just a control mechanism, to my mind. Um,
I'm with you, but is that control mechanism ultimately a value add if it helps moderation?
I mean, it clearly hasn't helped the tenor of anything on Facebook be good. So there's no reason to assume, oh, it's tied to their all the worst people on Facebook are perfectly fucking fine with you knowing exactly who they are while
Yeah.
they say what they say. So
But then are we discrediting, just as a talking point, kind of high concept, are we discrediting the difference between the Facebook as a social media entity where it's words on a page versus you as a VR avatar with your person with your real life identified to it? It's if we say VR is immersive or and different, I act differently behind a keyboard than I do as a VR avatar. Let's just be real. I do. I'm gonna be much more okay. And I don't say shit. I don't even use Facebook, but I am gonna be much more open to saying shit through text than I am as a virtual avatar face to face with another avatar. So is the real life identification connected to a virtual avatar different? And will that moderate differently than just behind a keyboard?
I don't know if I can generalize that. Like, I think people are super different about that, just because the way that people conceptualize an avatar in a digital space is so different based on raising, on age, on video game literacy, etc. Like, I would deeply hazard to assume that it's generally one way or the other with, people in general. I think you'd have to get pretty fine in terms of demographics to get constancy in that comparison.
Yeah, I feel that. There's really, it's. I speak with like Kavya about security, things like that. my biggest concern, especially having a kid, is just how to mitigate the social interactions in VR. I can't be there. Like, if my kid's playing a video game, I can see what's on the screen. You watching porn, I'll see it, man. Like, I just gotta open the door and I see it. I don't know what the hell is going on inside your headset. I can't control what any other user's doing. I can't control if you have phantom sense or if you get some type of emotional trigger doing. I can't control any of that. And that's always in the back of my head, is how do I mitigate anything in VR? And that's why I do hope to see some type of framework and moderation tools that we can know work. But right now it seems like the Wild West, and I'm not seeing any. Yeah, I agree with you. VR chat, like, there's some good tools. You have your personal space bubble, so if you have that on there, someone can't get in your face. If they get too close, they disappear. To my knowledge, I don't have it activated, but I do remember if someone got too close to me, they basically clipped out. You have privacy mode, where if I hit a certain button, it's very easy to hit. You can do it by accident. Everyone's avatars go away. Everybody's. They all turn into a gray, Fairly Odd Parents blob, and you can't even hear them. Those are pretty good tools, which I appreciate. But that doesn't stop as things go further. When haptic solutions come in, it's not going to stop touching. It's not going to stop grooming. I don't know the solution, but I do hope to see somebody start tackling that.
I mean, they're the same solutions that exist within any sort of social space. Like, all the things that you listed there are about sets of tools that that are placed entirely within the single user's responsibility to use to ameliorate certain sorts of things, that aren't just going Alt F4 and closing the application. And so I think anything that goes beyond that is, once again, like creating tools that empower groups to be able to filter, evaluate who's coming in. Like, you know, if you're over at the park, it's pretty easy to immediately tell who should be there and who shouldn't, sort of thing. And these spaces lack the ability to make those appraisals, and so that will be one of the big challenges with those spaces, is empowering people who run spaces to be able to tell who should be present and not. And it's, you know, everyone wants a gadget or an AI something to make it so that some person doesn't have to put in the hard social work that has always been required for, you know, social spaces to be functional. And I don't think it's gonna, if by the time that's a solved problem, the robots are doing all of our jobs and we're just, I don't know, existing off of the like byproduct that comes out of a SpaceX launch platform.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted, if I could just punch someone in VR and they feel pain, that would make me feel happy. So I could step in and put them where they deserve to be. But unfortunately, we can't do that. Let's go happy. Let's end this on happy. And when I say end this, there's whatever time we need, we have. But I always like to end these streams, at least in the last topic, something happy. What is making you happy right now in VR, and why? Because I think we speak, like, you get in these echo chambers of social media. It is the negative aspects, because it's it's clickable. Like, fucking Twitter's now putting downvotes because that's the culture that gets attention. I mean, hell. Engagement. But negative engagement is somehow better than positive engagement. It is. At least for the purposes of social media. But that's why I like to say, what's going on in VR that's making you happy that you can share, because we don't get much of that.
I mean, like, I've been playing so much walkabout mini golf.
I had a feeling you were going there.
Just perfection. It's exactly what it needs to be. And that's one of those things that, you know, I'm one of those sorts of people. And certain angles, I'm very easy to please when it comes to like games in VR. Like, what the compositions are so beautiful. They've got an incredible sense of place, which is always right at the top for me when it comes to VR anything. I want sense of place first. I don't want shit to get in my face and tell me what to do. If your app is like, hey, here, come over here, click this thing over here, let's get, I'm like, go fuck yourself. And I just shut the application. It's not pushy at all. It has a big open air feel. It's like trivial to get into a multi-user environment with someone else regardless. I tip my hat to all the folks who worked on that. I have been taking tons of meetings in it. Yeah. Playing several courses a day.
That's good, man.
So,
I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that when I asked the question, because I've seen your tweets about that. That is a game that I never actually played. I've seen it here and there. I think they reached out a while ago. I just never got around to it. I played plenty of Pro Putt, but not walk about mini golf. Um, what I'm also very curious about, um, from your mindset, you have a really good mindset of what I like in a VR game. Kind of what you said is, I agree. I don't particularly want an on the rails experience where they're telling me what to do. VR like is about exploration. It's about having some fun and relaxing. What is the low hanging fruit of something that you'd like to see come down the pipe on a game, an experience? What do you want to see developers start working on that adds that immersive layer of what VR can do? It doesn't need to be a game. I don't need a game. But what's the low hanging fruit in VR right now that's doable at a cost effective measure that adds a lot of value for an end user?
I mean, I know I don't speak for people's general tastes, so
Yeah.
that's a difficult thing for me. Like, what I want to experience more in VR is like I want things to make me laugh more. Like, I think one of the most wonderful things you can do in VR is comedy, because comedy that you watch in a little video window is great.
Hmm.
Comedy that's coming from someone who's sitting across the room from you is fantastic. Like, the best joke is one that's told right in front of you. Even better than that is a joke that engages you physically in some way, or the person who's next to you. Something funny has happened to them, something funny that's happened to you. It's why I've probably gone through Aperture Hand Labs like a dozen
Mm,
times at this point, because I do it if I'm just having a really, really bad day, because it's just, you get the knee slappers in it, just I love standing in the elevator and being told that we're now pursuing excellence while standing in an elevator. It's like one of the funniest jokes I've ever experienced, because it involves your body. Like, it's like it involves you having made no choice at all. That's why it's so brilliant, but why it feels so fundamentally different having that joke occur in VR than on a screen,
yep.
in a screenal game. So I want more jokes. I want more comedy. I want, a sense of place and a great story. Like, maybe it's because of the fact that I'm 5.5 years through a sandbox, very mechanics oriented, very simulation oriented game. Like, if I want that, I have our game, and I'm just going to play our game. So for the things that I want is, I want mystery, surprise, I want narrative when I go into, or I want just a simple action that is incredibly relaxing to do, which is why the mini golf is so perfect. Is one controller on the desk, hold the other one, and just nothing's gonna bother me while I listen to the sound of the surf, you know, and putt a ball.
I love it. Shout out to Cloud Headed Games for Aperture Hand Lab, guys. Check it out if you haven't. Anton, man, I think we're gonna call it there. Any last words before we end it?
I would just say to folks who are like, worried about, things being dead or coming in and out, is just to remember that, like, all this stuff takes so long, and all the only ones who are in a rush is Facebook, because they need to continually demonstrate the value of this, and because they're racing Apple, probably with only an incomplete picture of what Apple's doing, and everyone else is taking the, like, is working at the pace that's actually reasonable, given like GPU availability and how long games take to make. So I know you don't want to hear like be patient, but there's nothing to do with be patient, and try not to like overreact by trying to like read the tea leaves of short-term trends with this stuff, because most of these companies just run dark with what they're doing in the first place.
You might not want to hear it, guys, but it is the truth. Anton, thank you very much. For those who are still here, if you missed any of this, I know these streams are quite long, but we'll be clipping all these. They'll be on Eric for President Clips channel, all the good bits. You can find that video link that channel link in the video description. But Anton, again, thank you for joining us, or joining me. And
My pleasure.
as always, everybody, we'll see you next time, Space Cowboys. Peace.